Hi guys, and in today's lens review, we're going to be having a closer look at this monster lens we've got here, the Canon RF 28-70mm f2.L. And I'm going to start right now. What is up guys, Photo Fever here, and welcome back to another lens review. Now today we're reviewing a lens I have always wanted to review. Now I'm slowly and steadily working my way through a lot of the Canon RF lenses. I've for instance done the 16mm review, which I've only just done recently, but this lens here, it's actually been out for a while. Now this lens is revolutionary. It is basically a brand new and very unique lens on the market because it offers a maximum consistent aperture all the way through the focal range of f2. Most zoom lenses like the 24-70 of previous years was an f2.8. So this is a complete brand new design and I am super excited to test it out. So let's see how well this lens does in my tests. So let's kick this lens review off with build quality. Now, from a lens that's over £3,000, you would expect absolutely excellent build quality. And to be honest, you do get it with this lens. Now, this lens, as you can see it, is designed very differently to the older EF lenses. As you can see, there's no focus window and it is a lot more minimal looking than the previous generations. Now, I actually like this new look. It's a little bit more sleek and it's a little bit more subtle, although this is a very big lens. Now, on one side here, you've got a lockable switch just to prevent simply zooming. So if you lock it here, you can lock it at 28mm. If you unlock it, you can zoom from 28 to 70. It's just designed to prevent creeping. And then on the other side here is your autofocus to manual focus switch. Now there isn't an IS switch because this lens does not come with image stabilization. Now this lens is actually quite a complex optical lens, as you can expect a zoomable f2 aperture. So this lens has got 19 elements in 13 groups, and a lot of the groups are definitely towards the end of the barrel. So this is a very front heavy lens. But overall, I think this lens is very, very well made, and it's definitely worth a spot in your camera bag if you're after a lens that comes with a full metal construction and comes with weather sealing. So overall, I can't really down this lens in any way. So I'm going to be giving it the full marks, the 10 out of 10. Now, as I've previously mentioned, this is a revolutionary lens. Now, traditionally, most lenses zoomed from 24 to 70 and it offering an aperture of f2.8. So as you can see, this lens doesn't have the full wide angle aspect that the other lenses offer, but has the absolutely revolutionary design of an f2 aperture. And that's consistent aperture all the way from 28 all the way to 70. Now this is going to change the game for a lot of wedding and event photographers, simply because you've basically got a bunch of primes rolled up into one lens. But is the sharpness and the actual pure image quality up to the test? Let's find out by having a look at a few sample images. So I went ahead and used this lens on a recent photo shoot. Actually, I did it with a fellow YouTuber, AB Auto. If you're interested in any Mercedes related topics, then he is the guy to follow. He creates really good videos, so go give him a follow. Now, I absolutely loved these photos. The image quality of this lens was insane. I really loved the sharpness, corner to corner sharpness, but also the background separation because, again, the ability of shooting at f2. It offers a really nice shallow depth of field. And again, you've got this coupled with a zoom range. So you can zoom from 28mm all the way to 70mm. And I must say, this lens really doesn't have a downside. I can't find a chink in the armor when it comes to the image quality of this lens. I think it's absolutely astonishing. But let's go and have a look a little bit more scientifically at a few graph images. So let's go and have a look at the very first graph image here. So this photo was shot at 28mm at f2. Now if we go ahead and zoom into the center, you can see truly how sharp this lens is. Think this is f2, so this is wide open for this lens, and we're getting this level of sharpness straight out the gate. Now if we go over and zoom into the corners, although the corner is still very sharp, you'll notice there is a slight reduction in contrast, although it is a very minimal amount. Now we can increase the contrast by stepping down to f2.8, but it is a very minimal change. Overall, if we again zoom out, so this is still f2.8, you really can see how sharp this lens truly is. And it pretty much is the same story for f4, f5.6, and f8. Overall, this lens is very, very sharp. But if we step down to either f11 or f16, you will notice diffraction start taking shape, and this offers a little bit softer images. So I wouldn't step down to anything over f8. Now let's go ahead and zoom into 70 millimeters. So 70 millimeters at f2, again, the story continues. Very sharp corners to corner. So if we go ahead and zoom into the center, again, same sharpness that we saw at 28 millimeters. And then if we go over to the corners, again, that ever so slight reduction in contrast, although it is still very, very minimal. This lens truly is one of the sharpest lenses throughout its entire zoom range. Then if we go ahead to 2.8, again, that increased contrast does help the sharpness out, but overall it's again the same story. F4, very sharp. F5.6, still very sharp. F8, but then again, if we step down to f11, that's where diffraction starts taking shape, and you'll notice the corners and the center start getting a bit softer. But overall, the story is very good for sharpness. So let's go and have a look at distortion and vignetting. Now, you would expect a f2 zoomable lens to have very bad distortion and vignetting, but this lens has got excellent distortion and excellent vignetting. As you can see, there is pretty much no vignetting to be seen, and the distortion is very low. In fact, I don't think there's any distortion at 28 millimeters, which is really good to see. I find sometimes most standard zoom lenses do have bow distortion at their widest point. So if we go ahead and step down to f2.8, the vignetting, it completely disappears, although there was very little to start off with. And then again, the same story for f4, f5.6 and f8. So let's go ahead and zoom to 70 millimeters. Now, as you notice, there is still very little distortion, although there is a very mild amount of pinkish distortion, but I must say it is barely noticeable. There is a little bit more vignetting here, although it is barely noticeable. If we step down to f2.8, the corners do brighten up ever so slightly, and then again, it's the same story for f4, f5.6 and f8. So overall, there is basically no distortion and an ever so slight amount of vignetting. So as you can see, there are pretty much no downsides to the image quality of this lens. Very little chromatic aberration, corner to corner sharpness, but also very little distortion and vignetting, even wide open at f2. This lens has also got quite a good minimum focus distance of 39 centimeters. Granted, it's definitely not a macro lens, but again, it's not specifically designed for macro photography. So being quite close at 39 centimeters is definitely going to aid in the type of photography that you're going to be able to do with this lens. Again, it's really designed to be a bunch of primes rolled up into one single lens. It's designed to be maybe 28mm, 35mm, 50mm, and your 70mm kind of all rolled up into one. And to be honest, it is an absolutely astonishing lens. Now, I can't just give it 10 out of 10 because it genuinely doesn't do this justice. So for the very first time, and probably the only time, I'm going to be giving it an 11 out of 10 because this lens is just astonishing. So now I think it's time to move on to the elephant in the room, and that's right, we're talking about this lens here. This lens is big. It is big. It is absolutely gigantic. It dwarfs any other standard zoom lens on the market. It is genuinely huge. Now, grant you, if we do take the lens hood off, which is genuinely a massive lens hood, it doesn't really make this lens look much smaller, to be honest with you. It is huge, but it isn't just simply wide, it is genuinely girthy as well, and that's just because of the f2 aperture. Now, this lens has also got one of the largest filter threads I've ever seen, with offering a 95mm filter thread. So, to be honest, this lens really is very unique, and it's not something that's going to fit into most camera bags. But let's go and compare it to the other lenses that we can on the market. So obviously we've got this lens here, the 28-70. This lens comes in at 1,430 grams. Now, if we compare it to the kind of cousin of this lens, the Canon RF 24-70 f2.8, that only comes in at 900 grams. Then if we can go and compare it to the EF version, so that's the EF 24-70 that I've only recently tested on my channel, that comes in at 805 grams. So to be honest, this is almost double the weight of the EF 24-70 and about almost 500 grams heavier than the RF 24-70. Again, this is just due to the f2 aperture, but this is genuinely by far one of the biggest standard zoom lenses you can even buy. Again, it's you've got to weigh it up. Image quality versus size and weight, image quality all the way. This really has been dialed up to 11 when it comes to image quality, and everything else has kind of been forgotten about. That's why this lens isn't going to be scoring very high in this test, just because of the very poor size and weight. So I'm only going to be giving it a 4 out of 10 for size and weight. So now let's move on to focus motor and image stabilization, and what this lens is like for using it for video. Well, to be honest, this lens isn't really designed for video. Firstly, it doesn't actually fit onto my tripod at all because of the girth of the lens. You're going to need like a spacer in between the actual camera and the tripod to actually give this lens a little bit of room. So if you're planning on wanting to use this lens on a tripod, for instance, you're going to need to really think about what you're going to be doing. Also, it's way too heavy realistically to put onto a gimbal, so I wouldn't even try. Now, when it comes to the actual focus motor of this lens, I would actually say it's unbelievably quick. Now, I've been impressed by a lot of the RF lenses, the 100 to 500mm, even the cheap 50mm f1.8, and this lens really didn't let me down when it comes to the actual autofocus. Coupled with the R5, which again, revolutionary when it comes to its autofocus, really like the tracking when it comes to eye tracking and animal tracking. This lens is never going to let you down when it comes to autofocus, or even in video, although I wouldn't necessarily suggest this for video. And talking about image stabilization, well, it doesn't have any. That's because, again, you're asking too much. If you want image stabilization in an f2 lens, it's way too much. You can choose the f2.8. So if you're after image stabilization, definitely go for the 24 to 70 f2.8. But if you're using it specifically for photos, which again, I recommend with this lens, then this lens really is second to none. So I'm actually going to be marking it quite high because, again, video isn't necessarily its thing, and I think it's been designed around that. So I'm going to be giving it 8 out of 10 for the actual USM focus motor of this lens. Now, so far we have talked about the amazing image quality, the gigantic size and weight, but now it's time to move on to price. Now, as you can expect, this lens definitely isn't one of the cheapest lenses on the market. In fact, if you negate a lot of the super telephoto lenses like the 600 and 400, this is the most expensive L lens to date, coming in at a whopping £3,109. And at the moment in time, because we're filming it around Black Friday, this lens isn't even on the Black Friday deals, just because of how rare they are to find. They're very difficult to find just due to the supply and demand aspect, so don't expect this to ever be on sale. Now, we can compare it to a few other lenses. So, for instance, we compare it to its cousin lens, the RF 24 to 70. This is still even very expensive, even when you compare it to this, only coming in at £2,389. So you're not saving a great deal if you're going for this lens over the other lens, only around about £1,000. And again, if we go ahead and compare it to an older lens, so for instance the EF 24 to 70, again a lens I've very recently tested and I was very impressed by that lens. That lens comes in a bit more of a reasonable price of £1,799. Now, that is still very expensive, but the big advantage to that lens is you can buy it secondhand, which drastically reduces the price. I've looked around on Wex Photo Video and MPB, and you can get it for a good lens for around £1,300, so drastically less than this monster 28 to 70. Now, again, this lens isn't designed for the faint-hearted. It's designed for the very professional wedding and event photographers out there that price isn't really negotiable. It doesn't really matter. You're after the best of the best. And if you're after the best of the best with honours, then this lens is definitely going to be the one for you. But if you're an amateur photographer, stay well away, because this is going to drain your bank account and you're going to need to remortgage your house to buy this lens. So overall, I'm not going to be scoring it very high because, to be honest, I don't think anyone can afford it, even a professional photographer. So very expensive. So I'm only going to be giving it a 3 out of 10 for size and weight. So it's that time of the video again, guys, where we get to talk about the pros and cons to firstly work out if it will fit in your camera bag, but is it worth a spot in your camera bag? Let's find out by firstly looking at the pros of this lens. So to kick it all off, this lens has got great build quality and a full metal construction. This lens also offers weather sealing, which is great if you're planning on going at the great outdoors, either in a wet, moisture, or a dusty environment. This lens has also got probably the best image quality of a standard zoom lens. In fact, I would say it's better than a lot of prime lenses on the market with an amazing aperture of f2. This lens has also got one of the smoothest and best presenting bokeh I have ever seen of any standard zoom lens. And lastly, and to be honest, something you can't forget about this lens, it's got an amazing f2 aperture, which is great for creating shallow depth of field, but also in low light situations. Now that was quite a few pros, but let's go and have a look at the cons of this lens and why you shouldn't get this behemoth of a lens. Well, I suppose to kick it all off, just look at the size of this lens. It is huge, and it's not always going to fit in every single camera bag. This lens is also really expensive, the most expensive L lens if you forget about the 400 and 600 primes that you can get that are like £12,000. So you can see there are a lot more pros to cons of this lens, although the cons are very, very important to think about. This lens is very big and very heavy. So let's move on to final thoughts. Well, what can we talk about this lens here? This lens was an absolute dream to use. Now, I didn't use it as a wedding, I really wanted to, but the time I had this lens, annoyingly, I didn't have any weddings, but I must say it would have absolutely outshone any of the prime lenses I had on those times. Now, I used it at obviously my friend, who also is a YouTuber, go follow him, AB Auto, he is absolutely amazing, and the photos I got were genuinely stunning. Now, I probably could have replicated that with the prime lens, but I would have been switching lenses constantly throughout that photo shoot. And all I had was this lens, and it just worked throughout. The focus was perfect, and the overall just image quality was absolutely perfection. If you're after the best of the best when it comes to image quality, you can't look any other than this lens here. But if you live in the real world like all of us do, and you're wanting image quality, you're wanting fairly good pricing, and you're wanting something that's a little bit smaller, then realistically there are better options out there. This lens didn't necessarily score the highest in my tests, just because of the firstly size and weight, but if you do include the price into that, only coming in at 36 out of 50. That is with the 11 out of 10 when it comes to image quality built in. So overall, I wouldn't say it's the best lens out there, but when it comes to image quality, this is second to none. And there we go, guys. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this lens. Do you think it's worth buying? Do you own it, or have you ever used it? I would love to hear your feedback. Make sure to write it in the comments below. Again, guys, if you want to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, it really, really does help my channel grow. Also, guys, if you want to hit the bell notification so you guys don't miss any of my latest videos. Talking about my latest videos, I've got my latest RF lens video just up here. Or if you're more into tutorials, I do Photoshop tutorials on this channel as well. I've got my latest playlist just down here. But until next time, guys, keep creating.